On this episode of Law Weekly, we look at how well Nigeria has fared 63 years after independence. We have the views of an academic and legal practitioner, Professor Babafemi Badejo. Also showing on the program, a look at the rule of law agenda of the President Bola Tinubu administration, plus our recap of the top legal stories in the news. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Shola Shoyele. On October 1, 2023, Nigeria quietly marked its 63rd independence anniversary. It provided an opportunity to x-ray the Nigerian journey so far, and that's the starting point of my conversation with my guest, a professor of political science, a legal practitioner, author, and certified alternative dispute resolution expert, Professor Babafemi Badejo. He's dedicated almost 24 years of his life working with the UN. Amongst other things, he consults for governments, corporate and international organizations and others on issues of good governance, including rule of law, corruption, as well as on the management of conflicts. I began this interview with his opinion on how well Nigeria has fared 63 years after independence.
Well, it's important that we are alive, and we must accept that. And we must also accept the fact that we have been producing much of the carbohydrates that we eat, the millets in northern Nigeria, the gari and in southern, and yam in the central. At least we are not importing those ones. We have made quite some steps forward. We went through a civil war, we survived it, and we tried to build within that period after the civil war. That was the time when Gawan said, our problem is not money, but how to spend it. We spent a good amount into taking care of our problem without having to depend on others. So I will say that, yes, a number of things were achieved, but I will say at the same time that we made one step forward and we made 2-3 steps backward. And today it's not even now talking about making steps. Today we are inside a vicious spiral that is digging itself into the ground, and we are unable to help ourselves to come up out of that downward trends that has been going on. You can look at several factors. You don't even need to go far. Look at some of the basic roads that will take you from here to there, and it's horrendous. So there is huge infrastructure deficit that is not making it possible for us to achieve several other things. We don't pay a lot of attention to the food that is grown, that rots in the different places, because there are no connecting roads to make it easy for these to easily find themselves and encourage the farmers who are working very hard. You can look at the fact that no country will develop without an industrial revolution. What is the status of the various rolling mills that we were having in Oshogbo and all the rest of them? What are they producing today? I don't even want to talk about what have we made of Ajaokuta. To exchange for one telephone, one standard telephone, the prices are fixed beyond us. If you are looking at all those iPhones and Galaxy, you're talking about, in our currency of today, 1 million naira. And who earns that? So our value overall in the world has been falling, and we are not addressing any of that. We are busy chasing all unnecessaries in the 63 years. I'm not saying some people put a lot of effort, and I will always sing the praise of the Obafemi Awolowo effort in western region of Nigeria when he decided to throw everybody, irrespective of ethnicity, that was in the West, went to school and had that beginning opportunity, which makes it possible for the kind of things that he preached then still allowed parents to continue to put their children in school. And so it's possible to have some of them go out in this japa business. If you didn't go to school, if your parents didn't put you on the way to school, what will you be japaing with? So there is a lot that we could talk about.
What about our democracy? You did say in another forum that Nigeria is far from true democracy.
If we take the simplistic definition that everybody learned in the primary school, democracy, government of the people, by the people, for the people. Okay, government of the people is saying that you are the one governing yourself, not foreigners governing you. Okay, and we don't even need to analyze that further as to whether foreigners are controlling your president or whatever. Let's just accept that we are governing ourselves for argument's sake. Then you come to buy. Buy is talking about the participation of the people. And the participation of the people, election is just a small part of participation. When you look at, because people are participating in their governance in very many different areas than the rituals that they are made to go through once every 4 months. Every 4 years in the case of Nigeria. And then you go to the 4. The 4 is not a dividend, it's the core of democracy, the performance. To what extent are people benefiting and going towards not having to deal with hunger, not having to deal with poverty, having to have basic needs of health taken care of? All those sustainable development goals that the United Nations has put together. But we are chasing elections. The courts are riddled with electoral petitions. Every non-entity comes up and says, I am to be voted for, and bribes the hungry people, and they go into it, and they are unable to even think about what to do with the power when they got it eventually, whether from the Supreme Court at the end of the day, because we saw a number of cases that you ask yourself, what is the law? What is happening? Lawan was a very good one. Hope in Imo is a very good one. Many of those kind of cases that raises the question of, what are we talking about democracy? We are far and far from a true democracy in the case of Nigeria.
I like that you've brought in law. So let's talk about the rule of law. One of Nigeria's significant challenges is ensuring that the rule of law applies equally to all. But how would you say that successive governments have fared in that regard?
Well, what I can easily tell you on that score is that there is an inverse relationship between corruption and the rule of law. The more of one, the less of the other. So if you want to check to what extent there has been the rule of law in the 63 years, you can actually plot the rate of corruption, and as it is growing, the rule of law is climbing down. The story they tell about Awo, that they went to the UK to go negotiate about Nigeria. And I think Pa Alfred Rewani fell sick. And Okorodudu or whoever it was that was in charge of the office in London on behalf of went to Awo and said that we needed to take him to the hospital. And we want your authority for me to pay for the hospital needs. Awo said, never. How can you even come to me to ask that? So anybody that comes here on behalf of government and has any ailment or whatever, you will be spending the money of the state. Here is £50 from me, or some money from me. Shonibare can put some into it, and we all see what we can do to help him out of this. He did not take Western region's money to cater for somebody who had gone in terms of Western region service. Today, from Yaradua through to Buhari, through to the current president, We don't even care about the fact that what we are spending in maintaining the health of these people when they are not even serving us. The president diverted from New York and disappeared for a whole week. We don't know where. Where was the plane parked? What was being paid on it? Nobody talks about any of these basic issues. So if you're talking about rule of law and corruption is rising, you go and look at what is happening with respect to the justice system, starting from the police through to the lawyers, through to the relationship of the lawyers with the judges. And there are things that are being exposed now. The Supreme Court itself accused the former Chief Justice of Nigeria, and when the Supreme Court justices put their petition together, sent to Senate, what happened? He said he has health problems. And Buhari said, oh, you should have been here for longer, but with this health situation, I mean, it's a joke. The country is a joke. Chief Justice of Nigeria. I don't want to go back to Onohe as to how that one got out of office. But the successor. And then he went out and is going to now be sitting at the Council of State as former Chief Justice of Nigeria. Nobody, no whim. It's okay. It's okay. So how can you be talking about a rule of law in a country that takes that as cool, normal? That's how we operate. Before you come down to the lower levels of the justices that are to ensure that the rule of law functions. So plot the rate of corruption and you will be able to answer your question as to whether you have rule of law in operation.
But what has to give? What are the likely solutions that you see?
Well, if we are serious, we will address the source of the problems we are facing. And the problems we are facing, I have tried to suggest that the foundation of it is leadership deficit. Leadership deficit is the foundation, because all other things, as important as they are and as they should be addressed, if you have the correct leadership, that leadership will be in a position to address what is going wrong, will have the necessary vision on what is to be done. But we are not addressing that. So every crook in society in general, the very opposite of what the Yorubas call omoluabi, integrity and character, the people who are the opposite of that today are the ones stepping forward, are the ones able to step forward because they have stolen enough to be able to step forward. The younger people need to start organizing themselves and realizing that it is deception when they are being told, just go and vote in 4 years' time. Who are you voting for? Where are the candidates coming from? What has been the antecedents of the candidates that are involved? They must have a clear ideological orientation. They must have the necessary leadership with vision among themselves that is able to say, look, what this old man is talking about, how do we have leadership deficit cured? How do we halt corruption? How do we ensure that we free ourselves from the external dynamics that we face? How do we ensure that we build institutions, and our own little effort is going towards building such institutions so that we can have purposeful youths that can sit down and not just say, Atiku is our leader, Jagaban for life, Elupi Obi is the answer. Nobody digs into the past of all these people, including the Elupi and whatever. They just Yes, it became in the last election. And when you speak to some of them, that have you looked, you say, okay, yes, but yes, they are all corrupt, but I will take the one that is less corrupt. Why should you take the one that is less corrupt? How did we get there that is the way we now operate? That not so good, but better than is good for us. We can do better. And what I'm saying is that the younger people need to sit and answer these fundamental questions for themselves. It is after they have answered these fundamental questions that they will be able to come up with an appropriate ideological orientation that is able to work for our own environment. And with that ideological orientation, galvanize the people away from the state capture that we are facing today. If we don't do that, it cannot be good.
Thanks for staying tuned. Like his predecessors since 1999, President Bola Tinubu in his inaugural address on May 29 listed the rule of law as one of the guiding principles of his administration. In this next report, we attempt to examine the administration's stance on this critical issue and reiterate the fact that the rule of law concerns everybody.
The principles that will guide our administration are very simple. Nigeria will be impartially governed according to the rule of law.
President Bola Tinubu at his inauguration on May 29. But what is the plan to achieve this objective? The Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Lateef Fagbemi, gives some insights in his speech at the opening ceremony of the recently concluded 2023 Annual General Conference of the Nigerian Bar Association.
I have realized that with enormity of the task ahead or at hand, the most reliable approach in making significant progress will be to place the people at the center of every policy and strategy of the ministry. With the general support of Mr. President, my ministry will dedicate its time and resources in the promotion of people-centered justice, in the implementation of the much-needed legal and judicial reforms. We will maintain fair, transparent, and responsive process that will reflect the aspirations of Nigerians in the overall promotion of the rule of law and administration of justice.
He goes on to list the areas in which he will provide critical leadership, improving and strengthening strategic relationships among all the arms of government and the justice sector, facilitating a responsive justice system that promotes public confidence in the administration of justice and adherence to the rule of law, introducing reforms in the laws, the judicial systems, and law enforcement with a view to achieving compliance with extant laws and judicial decisions, benchmarking investment law regime to favorably compare with global best practices, and this supports other economic growth regeneration initiatives. However, promises like these have been made by past administrations, and the reforms they introduced to reposition the judiciary and improve the capacity and capability of the anti-graft agencies did not resolve the issues afflicting the sector. The problems of access to justice, delay in the process of justice delivery, the independence of the judiciary and financial autonomy, unlawful and arbitrary killings, arbitrary arrest, severe restrictions on free expression and media, including violence or threats against journalists, are still as prominent as at when democracy returned in 1999.
The rule of law means that everybody will be subservient to the standards of the Constitution and to the laws relating to our daily expressions. That's what the rule of law means. At the end of the day, it's the leaders, it's the political people who interpret the rule of law to suit themselves. For instance, President Buhari said that the rule of law is subservient to national security. So that's his own interpretation. But I think there's only one interpretation. The rule of law stands above all of us. Without rule of law, you can't grow.
To underline the challenges of the adherence to the dictates of the rule of law in the country, the U.S. Department of State's 2021 Nigeria Country Report deplored unlawful and arbitrary arrest, detention and torture of political activists and critics, as well as restrictions on freedom of the press and association. Already, the Tinubu administration is being criticized for the way it is handling the arrest, detention and investigation of the former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, and the suspended chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Abdulrasheed Bawa. Both men have been in detention since operatives of the Department of State Services DSS arrested them in June, and while Mr. Emefiele has been charged to court, the government has simply refused to release or charge Mr. Bawa. Beyond this, many have also cited the issue of the unnecessary clashes between security agencies, particularly between the EFCC and DSS, the DSS and correctional officers, and the police and the army, with the consensus being that the government must articulate a coherent policy framework that clearly defines the roles and relationships between and among the agencies, especially those involved in the criminal justice system. At the end of the day, the rule of law is everyone's business.
I think that generally it's not well appreciated that the concept of rule of law applies to everybody. It's not just a question of the executive disobeying court orders. It also applies even to the judges themselves. The need for them to uphold the law as enacted by the competent authority of the National Assembly.
Strong opposition, strong opposition parties, multipartism, so strong civil society, strong media. Look at President Trump. In spite of all the judges he appointed, 62 cases that they put into court in order to stage a coup on America. It failed. It was the concept of the rule of law and strong institutions that stopped him.
Will government at all levels pay lip service to the issue of rule of law? Will the citizens play their part? The next 3.5 years are critical. And just before we go, let's quickly do a recap of some of the top trending stories from the courtrooms.
We begin with the report that the Supreme Court has fixed December the 15th to deliver its judgment in the appeal seeking to compel the federal government to release Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, from detention. A 5-member panel led by Justice Kudirat Kekereekun fixed the date after counsel for both the federal government and the detained IPOB leader accepted their final briefs of argument. Counsel to Kanu, Mike Ozekome, asked the court to not only order the immediate release of his client from detention, but to equally award very heavy and punitive costs against the federal government. In his submission, however, counsel to the federal government, Tijani Ghazali, asked the court to allow the federal government's appeal, which is asking that the judgment of the Court of Appeal that ordered Mr. Kanu's release be set aside. Mr. Ghazali also urged the Apex Court to dismiss Kanu's cross-appeal. In Lagos, the scheduled arraignment of businessman Chief Cletus Ibeto alongside his company Ibeto Energy Development Company before the Lagos State High Court Ikeja was stalled owing to the absence of the defendants in court. Chief Ibeto and his company are facing a 10-count charge bordering on allegations of obtaining, by false pretenses, fraudulent conversion of property, criminal breach of trust, forgery and deception brought against them by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Also included in the charge was another company linked to Ibeto, Odo Holdings Limited. At the proceedings, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Dr. Onyechi Ikpeazu, reminded the court that the defendant was ill and this was the reason for his absence at the last sitting of the court. This time, he told the court that the defense team was considering a plea bargain with the prosecution and the process was ongoing. He then asked for a short adjournment to enable them conclude. The prosecutor, another senior advocate, Rotimi Jacobs, reminded the judge that the case was adjourned at the last proceeding due to the absence of defendants. He, however, agreed that the parties could explore out-of-court settlements if the defendants were serious and committed to the process. After listening to the parties, the trial judge, Justice Ismail Ijelu, frowned at the attitude of the defendants. He noted that the court had adjourned the case thrice at the instance of the defendants, but following the agreement of all parties, the court further adjourned the case till November the 3rd for the arraignment of the defendants. In the UK, a former Minister of Petroleum Resources, Diezani Alison Madueke, has been arraigned before the Westminster Court in London over bribery allegations. The EFCC, in a statement by its acting head of media and publicity, Dele Oyewale, welcomed the arraignment with keen interest. Although the charges preferred against her at the London court are diametrically different from the 13-count charges bordering on money laundering the EFCC has raised against her, it is instructive to note that criminality is criminality, irrespective of jurisdictional differences, the anti-graft agency said. No crime can go unpunished. The money laundering charges for which Madueke is answerable to the EFCC cover jurisdictions in Dubai, United Kingdom, United States of America, and Nigeria. And we round off with a report that the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Olukayode Ariwoola, has charged judges to always apply constitutional provisions in deciding each case that is assigned to them. He adds that despite the attacks on the judiciary, public opinion, no matter how serious, cannot override or supersede the constitution of the country. The CJN was speaking in Abuja at the swearing-in of 23 new judges of the Federal High Court.
And that's the program for today. If you missed any part of it, you can find it in past episodes on our YouTube channel. Do also give us feedback via any of our social media platforms. I'm Shola Sheyele. Thank you for watching and see you next week.